Me now is Michigan's Democratic Secretary of State Jocelyn Benson. She oversees Michigan's elections to try to make sure that they remain free and fair. She received the Presidential Citizens Medal for defending democracy after January 6th. And she is certainly my go-to as far as Secretary of States are concerned. You and I have had so many conversations over the last few years. So when this topic came up, when we had the conversation with Judge Luttig, I wanted to talk to you. I wanted to say, how are you thinking about this? Because you are thinking about these things all the time. Welcome back to the show, and let's talk about this.
Yeah, thank you, Ali. I'm really glad I could be here today because this is a really important discussion. I think the arguments for disqualification are quite strong, but we also have to recognize that we're in uncharted territory here, and there are counter arguments on the other side that need to be explored, important questions. Even if you set aside the question of does this happen before or post a conviction? Where is due process? What is the definition of insurrection or rebellion? What is giving aid and comfort? And who is the proper authority to make those definitions? I think the courts have a critical role to play here, certainly the U.S. Supreme Court. But I also recognize our role in this. And, noting that Michigan and I personally witnessed a lot of these attempts, personally experienced them in Michigan, and certainly my colleagues in Georgia and now Secretary of the Commonwealth Al Schmidt in Pennsylvania can say the same. So that weighs heavily on me as well as a witness to these attempts to overturn our democracy.
It's become a little challenging for me because everywhere I go now, I carry these 4 indictments around with me so I can make references to them. But in 2 of them, the Jack Smith January 6th indictment and the Fani Willis Georgia indictment, Michigan figures very centrally. And there were actors in Michigan who actually did the right thing, regardless of who they supported for president. And there were some actors who were doing some really bad things. Tell me about, just for a second, tell me about the politics of this, right? Everything you do is going to fall under deep scrutiny. It has since before the 2020 election. How does that play a role in how you think about this determination, this discussion?
It's a reality. I mean, my office has been inundated with calls. My staff has been inundated with threats since this became a issue in the last several weeks on both sides, people arguing their case. But I'm going to proceed according to the law. I'm going to follow the law. I'm going to follow the Constitution. And I'm going to make sure that any decision we make is based in the law, in the Constitution, and on evidence and facts. That's how we need to proceed here. This can't be a political decision, and it won't.
Let me ask you about in Michigan's process for getting a presidential candidate on the ballot. I want to show our viewers sort of a checklist that exists, and you can tell me how much of this is actually true and how this process would actually work. The access checklist for presidential candidates is limited to candidates who are in the Democratic and Republican parties, so they'd have to check that. Then we understand that the name must be present on the Secretary of State and the party chair's list of candidates. And if the name is not present, the candidate can petition. Okay. That sound right so far?
Yes, and I would add that we also have the ability to add candidates whose names are in the public record as being candidates for president. My office has that ability as well.
So then is there such a thing on your checklist that deals with the very basic constitutional requirements to run for president, having to be a citizen, having to be born here, having to be of the age of 35, and then possibly, because people will ask you this, not having been involved in an insurrection after having taken an oath of office, swearing fealty to the Constitution?
Not explicitly in the law, and that's something of consideration here as well. I mean, we already have some active legal cases pursuing the question of who has the authority directing me not to allow anyone on the ballot who the Constitution may disqualify. So again, the final arbiter, while the secretaries of state in various states may make an initial statement either for qualification or against qualification or within the bounds of our authority, the ultimate decider in this case is going to be the courts, and really the ultimate court to resolve this will be the United States Supreme Court. And in that regard, we hope that decision, however it makes its way to the court, comes sooner rather than later. And then I'll also add the caveat that this is the primary process. The party or either party will nominate their candidate at a convention next summer. And so if the nomination then prevents someone who is disqualified, there may be another round of this discussion. And then, certainly if someone who is, arguably disqualified is elected, even through that process, there may be a third round. So I think we also need to buckle down and prepare for this to be an issue throughout this cycle, alongside the criminal cases that are also still playing out this cycle.
You make a very interesting point. The provision in the Constitution is about holding office. It's not about getting elected to office.
Right. And so we're also mindful that decisions made in this moment, in the next several months around the primary ballot, may be only the first step of this issue being played out. We also have a question of if a conviction comes or if a resolution comes to these cases in the interim, how that plays out. And so the important thing is we're going to, in Michigan and in several other states, collaborate with secretaries to have a very open, transparent discussion as we proceed according to the law and talk to various experts, many of whom you've had on the show, and others, to really understand our role under the law and proceed in all circumstances in accordance with that, and allowing politics to not play a role in this at all.
One of the things that was interesting about what Judge Luttig and Lawrence Tribe said to me, and Judge Luttig will be on in the next hour, is that where the determination of the breach in the Constitution comes in, the idea that you were involved in an insurrection after having sworn an oath of office. So there are a whole lot of people to whom this doesn't apply. There are people who could have participated in insurrection who never swore an oath to the Constitution. And if a literal reading of the Constitution would say they're not prevented from holding office. However, the determination, it's not just the idea that you, as a Secretary of State, may need to make that. It's on the basis of what? The impeachment, the evidence that's been provided to the public, the general sentiment that Donald Trump was behind this, a court conviction, one of these indictments. What do you know yet what you're going to be looking at to be certain of whether or not Donald Trump or other people running for office were involved in an insurrection?
Well, I think first and foremost, it's the procedures and authority that I have under the law, both in the primary setting and in the general election setting. And then I think secondly, it is the facts and the evidence that was both revealed or illuminated during the January 6th congressional hearings, the court cases that will be proceeding, and also, again, what happened in Michigan to our voters. And Michigan is unique in amongst many states in this, in that we actually had the former president pressure officials in our state to not certify the election directly. And, that is front of mind for me as well, that our voters were directly in the line of fire in their voice and their will to these attempts. And so I weigh that very heavily as well, I believe my responsibility to do so. I also weigh, frankly, the guardrails issue. Where this is an unprecedented moment, unprecedented, uncharted territory for us. How do we ensure any decision we make is not easily weaponized in the future to enable future officials to block candidates from the ballot simply for political reasons in that case? So, the precedent that we create in everything that we do over the next 18 months also is front of mind for me.
My viewers will understand why it is I wanted so badly to speak to you about this, because you really take the time to explain the detail about what is going to go into your decisions. And the whole country is going to be watching, not just all the Secretary of States, but very closely you, because you've been at the front of this discussion the whole time. We really appreciate your service to the country and your time this morning.